What is the relationship between our fears and our values? Can we change our behavior to become more successful in achieving our goals? This time, I interviewed Mads Damgaard, an Erickson Professional Coach helping others find meaning in their work. I am Jose Antonio Morales, and you are listening to a Deconstructing Fear interview.
Story about fear and overcoming it, and I was looking back on my life, and I think one of the times when that stands out to me across my life is when I was a young man. I think we were in just beginning high school, and we were at a lake with some friends and from my class, and there was a girl. She was unfortunately not very popular in school, and she had a lot of problems on the home front. So she was kind of an easy victim. And there were a couple of guys that were picking on her and kind of wanted to throw her in the water, and not in a good way. And I was standing there with my friends, and I could just feel my anger boiling up in me. And I was afraid because these were two big guys, and I am not a big guy myself. I had glasses, I was really not anybody that was kind of fit to take on these two guys, but I could just feel like something that was more powerful inside of me was my anger at the injustice of these two boys that were so much bigger than this poor girl. And I walked over there and stood between them, and they were pushing me down and knocking my glasses off. But I just kept coming because I had a commitment to something bigger than my fear. And funny enough, after they backed off and, we got the girl away and so on, and I returned to my friends there, one of the guys actually came over to me and apologized because he had realized that that was not okay. I think it shows kind of how our values are really bonded deeply inside of us. And I was already there connecting with a value around justice. I get really angry when I see injustice because I know what it's like to be in a situation where you're helpless and being being denied your dignity as a human being. And so it relates in that way, is that was I had known, it's a really good example of how early on some of those values surfaced for me. It was like, this is part of who I am, because that's who I am today also. So that kind of showed me my own character in a way. That was a flash moment for me. This feeling of injustice was quite something that I had a lot of experience with, because I grew up in a very chaotic situation in my home, and I had in my own school been bullied a lot, and I was also bullied to some extent at home, and I knew, and I think it reminded me that girl's situation reminded me very heavily of my own situation and experiences. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's a very important aspect of what we care about, is something that we need to have some kind of firsthand experience with it to really understand, to really have that empathy for what it feels like to be on the receiving end of an overwhelming threat. And so, yes, I really think that the reason why I resonated so strongly with that was because of my own experiences being bullied and my own experiences being afraid. Fear, in a way, also led me to my purpose and to having that whole discussion at a relatively young age, because I grew up, as I said, in a troubled household, and I lost my mother relatively early at 11 to cancer. And then my dad died some years later when I was 24. So I experienced a lot of heavy things quite early in my life, which also accelerated, I think, my path towards finding a life purpose for myself, because I had death up close and personal very early on. And I think when you're talking about fear, I subscribe to the belief that all fear is ultimately the fear of death. And I got a lot of experience being around death, being around mortally sick loved ones, and kind of coming through a depression about that, because it showed me very early on that, yeah, we are going to die. There is so far no way around it. And that knowledge of death, I think, is really important in order to find your life's purpose. You have to know that the theme park is going to close at some point and you can't go on any more rides. So you better choose the theme park rides that you want to ride on and go for those, instead of just kind of continually hanging around the popcorn stand. So fear, I think, it really does play a role in finding your purpose, because it is a conquering fear is kind of conquering the fear of death. And when you let go of your fear of death, that is when you realize you've got limited time. So you got to do what you got to do, because when it's over, it's over. And you also need to. It becomes easier to deal with the fear of failure, which is also in itself a masked fear of death, because that you need that in order to strike out and do something different in your life than you already have. All right. Yeah. So a group that kind of comes to mind that is affected by fear is basically, if you go to any major newspaper and read their comment section, you will see a raging cesspool of vitriol and abuse and hatred, and this is really a great example of a group of people in the grip of fear. And it might seem counterintuitive to why that is happening like that, but it becomes easier to understand when you realize that fear is an ancient system that was created to keep an animal safe in a dangerous but simple world. All right. And the fear system, as I like to call it, is it kind of it evolved millions of years ago, before we even had this cerebral cortex that we have. It's part of the animal brain. Most animals feel fear because it's such a useful system, but it's very simple, it's very crude. And it basically, once that fear system is activated, you basically have three different options of responding. One is fight, one is flight, and the other is freeze or faint. Right. And what you're seeing in those newspaper commentary tracks are people that are in a fighting mode because they're afraid of something. And it can be a very subconscious or unconscious thing. People, most of our fears are unconscious. Many times we'll feel fear and we don't know why it is. And because it's such an unpleasant feeling, the mind will try to come up with ways of solving that. And it only has these three ways of dealing with it. And that means that for some people, they develop a habit of going on the attack. And some people withdraw or flee. And some people just kind of lose their ability to make coherent plans, and they just kind of sit in place and do what they always have. So yeah, that's for me, it's a really good example that just is so obvious that what's going on, those newspaper commentary sections.
So that means that those persons that are making these violent comments or angry comments uh, are not aware of the fear that is motivating that rage.
That is absolutely correct. And that is, I think, one of the profound things about your work, Jose, that I really appreciate, like that we need to talk more about this. We need to have deeper conversations and spread more knowledge about how this system is affecting us on a cultural level, on a societal level, as a people and as individuals. Yeah, I think that's a great question, Jose. And I think it's yeah, it's vital that we do so, and the way I think we can do it is by becoming aware of how the fear system works. Okay, now I'm not interested so much in all the technicalities and putting, you know, this is that type of fear, that's that type of fear. I think in some ways it's like putting names on all the colors of the rainbow. You know, it's helpful up to an extent, but you know, more than a few are probably, it might be helpful, but for me, I try to focus on what is the cause of fear. And I think the primary function of fear, because it's a very useful system, is not something we need to get rid of. It is really something that has ensured our survival as animals and as people, because the main function of the fear system is to keep us alive. And so that is the main value that fear alerts us to, like, I want to live. And all the other fears that we have, fear of public speaking, fear of heights, fear of spiders, fear of being rejected by somebody, it all comes down to, I want to live. That is the main value we've got there. And so I think it might be useful to build a culture that knows more about how fear operates. And I'll talk a little bit about the technicalities of it that I also use with my clients. Basically, if you're willing to go a little bit down the rabbit hole with me, you know, it's like fear of spiders. How does that relate to death? You know, fear of death. That's pretty easy, right? You know, because some spiders are dangerous and they might bite you, right? So it's no brainer. Same thing with fear of heights. That's also pretty easy to relate to the fear of death, because you might fall down. That was one of the things that killed a lot of us when we were walking on the savannah back in the day in Africa. But something more subtle, like, for instance, a client of mine, she was looking for work, and you know, when she found a job description that she was excited about, she would have it open in her browser on the computer, and would just wait and wait and wait and not be able to get the courage to call and actually ask more about this position here. And we were working through it, and I asked her, what mental images come up for you when you think about this? You know, because I hope you're familiar with mental imagery. You know, like, we all have this voice inside of our head. We have pictures, we have video, we have thoughts that go through us. We talk to ourselves, right? So I asked her, what mental images come up for you as you get ready to maybe call this person? And it was, you know, she looked into herself and kind of sat and was quiet for a while, and then she said, oh, you know, I think the person is going to be really mean to me. That was the image that she was having. And this is very telltale in how the fear system works. It works by your mental images or your mental thoughts reflecting in the body. We feel fear in the body, but it is a reflection of the mental activity and the understanding that we have of the situation. All right. And so the way we can begin to evolve as a culture is to become more aware. What are the mental images? Because for a lot of people, when I say, what mental images are coming up for you, they're like, wait, what? I don't know. What are you talking about? They're just not in touch with that internal space of what's going on. And that is where all the fear is being generated. You're going to have fear of anything that you are afraid of, as long as those images persist. If you have, there's no objective reason to have be afraid of a spider here, but in your mind, you have a different image than the little spider that's here. You have maybe you're seeing Shelob, or seeing that spider that scared you when you were a kid that looked really big and frightening. So the key to changing our relationship with fear as a culture is to change the way that we build images in our minds. And as soon as I asked her to say, hey, how would you feel if you knew that the person that you were going to be calling would be really happy to hear from you? Just try and build that image in your head, and you should see the change in her body posture. She was sitting upright. She was smiling as she was generating that image, because as you change the image, so the feeling in your body changes, and the fear system shuts down, and you get access to all of that wonderful creative thinking that you get from your neocortex. Because the fear system, because it's such an old system, it takes over. It's much more powerful than the newer addition to our brain, which is all this gray matter where we can imagine futures and we can think about creative stuff. It's much more powerful, but much more simple. And when it takes over, we can't think creatively. And that's also why if you're in an exam, you all of a sudden you don't know anything. Apparently, you lose everything you can do, but that's just because you're afraid. Who am I without fear? And I love that question, because I think that is where we could be headed. It's not probably something that is going to be achievable in my lifetime, but and also I think fear has its purpose and its uses, but the fear that we're having right now is not really useful in the complex reality that we're living in. So if I were to change the mental images that cause fear in me and focus solely on what do I want, and have the love inside me that I need to know that even if I die right now, I'm still going to love myself. Even if I'm thrown out of my tribe, I'm not going to die. Or I'm not going to, it's not a problem. If I conquer death, then I would be free of fear. And if I'm free of fear, then I am free to do anything. And this is really what Buddha is talking about, what Jesus was all about. All of the spiritual masters that have true power, they've conquered the fear of death. I mean, they will still be afraid if somebody would threaten them with a knife, because that's the way it is. But they don't have that fear anymore of what will others think about me, what will happen. They've conquered the fear of death, and then the world is open for you. You can go over to somebody, you can make new connections, you can start a business venture. If it collapses, you're going to do, of course, everything you can to not have it collapse, but you're not going to feel like a failure if it collapses, because you tried your hardest. And it's really the best way to the best foundation to live your life from.